Boldwood presents The Fall, written by Shari Lowe and Ross King, read by Ross King and Helen McAlpine. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. From Ross. For Davie Johnston King and Isabel King, my heroes, my pals, and my pops and wee Bella, forever in my heart. And for the best sister in the world, Elaine, and the family, Jim, Hollie, and Ewan. And to all my dear pals, you know who you are. From Shari, from my love, John, and our family who are everything, always. And for the incredible women in my life, for the strength, the support, and the laughs that get us through everything. About the authors. When a budding radio DJ and actor met a young nightclub manager in Glasgow in the late 1980s, little did they know that over 30 years and thousands of miles later, they would still be friends. Los Angeles-based Ross King, MBE, is a four-time News Emmy award-winning TV and radio host, actor, producer, writer, voiceover artist, and performer. King has starred in London's West End, appeared in over 10 movies, and hosted TV shows in the UK, Europe, USA, and Australia. He has also presented countless radio shows and pens a Sunday newspaper column in the Sunday Post. In 2018, he received an MBE from the Queen for services to broadcasting, the arts, and charity. Best-selling author Shari Lowe released her first book in 2001. Since then, she has published over 30 novels, selling over 2 million books worldwide, including the recent hits One Last Day of Summer and One Day with You. Shari splits her time between Glasgow and Los Angeles, and wherever she is, she's probably writing the next chapter of a book. Visit Ross's website at www.rossking.com, Instagram and Twitter at The Ross King. Visit Shari's website at www.sharilowe.com, Instagram at Shari Lowe Books, Twitter at Shari Lowe. Introduction. Welcome to The Fall. This is the third book in the Hollywood series featuring movie star Zander Leith, TV producer Davie Johnston, and writing legend Mirren McLean. If you haven't read The Rise and The Catch, the first two books in the series, don't worry, because here's everything you need to know to catch up. Mirren McLean, Davie Johnston, and Zander Leith, three Hollywood superstars who grew up together in a tough housing estate in Glasgow. Back then, Mirren's mother, Marilyn, was the mistress of Zander's father, a violent gangster called John Leith. Neglected, living in poverty, the three youngsters were inseparable, the family that they chose for themselves. Until the unthinkable happened. John Leith raped 17-year-old Mirren, and her mother killed him. Not because Marilyn was protecting her daughter, but because she was consumed with jealousy that Jono had touched another woman. Desperate to escape the horror of what had just happened, the three youngsters covered it up, burying Jono's body under the shed in Davie's garden. Marilyn disappeared into the wind, and the world thought Jono had gone to ground to avoid rival gangsters. He wasn't missed. That could have been the end of it. Case closed. However, as a way to process the trauma, Mirren wrote the story of what happened, and, against all odds, it found its way to a Hollywood producer, Wes Lomax. He turned Mirren's words into a movie, The Brutal Circle, a cult hit that unexpectedly became a box office smash, winning Mirren, Davie, and Zander an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. The whole world believed it was fiction, and the success brought brand new Hollywood lives for the three Scots. Zander became an A-list star thanks to his leading role as spy Seb Dunhill in a hugely successful movie series. Davie went on to make millions as a producer of some of the biggest shows on television, and Mirren secured her position as a powerful player in the industry by writing, directing, and producing one of the most iconic film franchises of all time. But fame and fortune came at a price. The shame and pain of finding success by capitalizing on the worst moment in their lives drove the three of them apart. They didn't speak for 20 years, until a young journalist from Scotland, Sarah Mackenzie, began digging into their past. Eventually, Sarah discovered the truth about what happened to John Leith, but by then, it was too late. She'd fallen in love with Davie Johnston and killed the story to protect him. Along the way, the ghosts of the past brought the hope of resolution. Sarah's investigation forced Mirren, Davie and Zander to reconnect 2 decades after they'd walked away from each other. It wasn't always easy. The pain was still there. Davie's discovery that John Leith was his father too was tough to digest. Mirren's mother was dead to her, but her presence always lingered. And Zander's demons from his childhood still pushed him towards a bottle. But in The Catch, all those issues were set to one side when the 3 famous names were targeted in a series of violent, disturbing incidents. Davie's house was attacked, shots were fired at his gates, an arsonist set fire to his home, and he was ambushed by a stalker. Zander was busy fighting fires of a different kind. His apartment was ransacked. He was falsely accused of a sex crime he didn't commit, and his integrity, friendships, and career teetered on the edge of destruction when he gave a positive drug test. This despite being clean since the death of Mirren's 18-year-old daughter, Chloe, a fellow addict that he tried desperately to save. Mirren had her own demons to combat. Still grieving over Chloe, her world was rocked when Marilyn came back into her life in the most brutal way. At first, the 3 friends suspected that Marilyn was at the root of all their troubles. But a violent explosion at the Academy Awards in 2014 claimed Marilyn's life, and the truth was revealed. Davie and Zander had been targeted by people they'd crossed in the past, enemies who would no longer trouble them after their acts were exposed and justice was served, and not necessarily in a courtroom. The Catch ended with peace, with resolution, with the 3 of them battle-scarred but still standing. Mirren found love with studio head Mike Feakin. Zander married Hollie, the assistant who'd stuck by him through years of off-screen struggle. Davie and Sarah were committed to a future together, and all 3 of them saw their careers soar. However, in Hollywood, happy endings don't last forever. Sometimes they're just the calm before the storm. The Hollywood cast. Mirren's world. Mirren McLean, born and raised in Glasgow, now a major Hollywood player, best-selling author, Oscar-winning screenwriter, director, and producer of the iconic Klansman movies. Mike Feakin, Mirren's husband of 4 years, CEO of Picture, the TV and movie studio that makes Mirren McLean's Klansman series. Father of Jade, 16. Chloe Gore, Mirren's daughter, wild child, addict, troubled soul. Died in 2013 from an overdose, aged 18. Logan Gore, Mirren's son, gained worldwide success as former lead guitarist and singer in South City, the boy band that was on the walls of teenagers across the globe from 2012 to 2016. Now a solo artist, married to Lauren Finney Gore, singer, songwriter, global sensation. First came to fame as a winner of Davie's talent show, American Stars. Marilyn McLean, Mirren's mother, who killed her lover, John Leith, in cold blood, now deceased. Lou Cole, Mirren's best friend of over 25 years, journalist, gossip queen, and editor of The Hollywood Post. Lex Callahan, movie star, plays the lead role in The Klansman, but shuns the limelight when he's off-screen. Cara Callahan, Lex's wife, a Native American beauty who runs an equine therapy center at their 1,500-acre ranch in Santa Barbara. Jack Gore, Mirren's ex-husband of almost 2 decades, movie producer turned midlife crisis cliché. Jason Grimes, a counsellor at one of the branches of Chloe's Care, the drop-in centre's Mirren funds for young addicts. Davie's World. Davie Johnston, multi-millionaire presenter, host and producer of some of the biggest reality hits on American television. Jenny Rico, Davie's ex-wife, lead actress on hit TV cop show Streets of Power. Darcy J., Jenny Rico's partner, both on and off-screen. Bella and Bray, Davie and Jenny's 14-year-old red-haired twins, child stars of sitcom Family 3. Bella is now the next Hannah Montana, while Bray shuns the limelight. Ina Johnston, Davie's mother and keeper of his secrets, still lives in his childhood home in Glasgow. Cal Wolfe, Davie's ruthless, sharp-suited former agent, a moral vacuum in a world where all that matters is power and profit. Drago and Alina, Davie's loyal gardener, driver, and his tempestuous housekeeper. Melly Santos, the mildly terrifying caustic producer on Davie's talk show, Davie Johnston As It Is. Lainey Anders, country music legend, friend, and former judge in Davie's old show, American Stars. Zander's World. Zander Leith, icon, actor, action hero, and star of the Dunhill movie franchise, former loner, addict, and no stranger to uninvited violence, rehab, and jail cells, now happily married and has found peace for the first time in his life. Hollie Leith, Zander's former personal assistant, right-hand woman, and unfailingly loyal, smart-mouthed friend, now his wife of 5 years. Jono Leith, Zander's father, Glasgow gangster, and one of the most evil bastards to ever walk the earth, killed in 1989 by his mistress, Mirren's mother, Marilyn. Wes Lomax, legendary studio head with a sexual appetite that's as ferocious as his temper. Sarah's World. Sarah Mackenzie, Scottish journalist who came to LA to investigate rumours about Davie, Zander and Mirren's past lives, but fell in love with Davie Johnston. Now Davie's fiancée, she's the author of 2 best-selling books on the dark side of Hollywood and is currently writing a 3rd. She has a new role as an investigative journalist for the crime documentary show Out of the Shadows. The Out of the Shadows team. Chip Chasner, executive producer. Mei-Lin Chong, investigative journalist and co-anchor. Chandra Walker, super smart young researcher. Hank Travis, head of legal for the production company that makes the show.
Prologue. The Academy Awards, the Dolby Theatre, 24th of February 2019. Fame, David Bowie. Myla Rivera reporting for the Fame Channel. Welcome to the 91st Academy Awards live from the Dolby Theatre in the heart of Hollywood. And what a spectacle this promises to be. We'll be sharing every moment right here on the Fame Channel. Behind me, the stars are just beginning to arrive for Hollywood's biggest night, and we'll be chatting with them soon and checking out all the fashion on the red carpet. Of course, we'll have some hot gossip for you too. Plus, we'll be sharing our predictions as to who will be heading home with the most wanted man in Hollywood, Oscar. We'll also be keeping you updated on the biggest story of the day so far. The tragic situation unfolding in Malibu right now, where an unseasonal wildfire has reportedly claimed the home of Zander Leith, a much-loved friend of many of the industry names who will be arriving this evening. Let's take a look at the moment Zander won his Academy Award back in 1993 for the original screenplay written by Leith, Davie Johnston and Mirren McLean. Cut to a VT package. The Academy Awards, 1993. Actress Lana DeLasso announces the winners in the category of Best Original Screenplay. Zander Leith, Mirren McLean and Davie Johnston, all barely in their 20s, take to the stage and pick up the gold statue for their movie, The Brutal Circle. Cut back to Myla Rivera. At the moment, we've no information on Zander Leith's location. But before today's events, he was expected to attend tonight's ceremony to present the award for Best Director, a category in which one of the nominees is his old friend and no stranger to controversy this year, Mirren McLean. So, be one of the billion people worldwide tuning in tonight for all the latest news, fashion, and of course, the awards. Stay right here on the Fame channel, and we'll be right back after these messages. Broadcast ends. Myla Rivera looks off camera, taps her earpiece, speaks to the producer in the gallery. Billion people, my ass. Why are we still peddling that bullshit? Lucky if it's even half of that. Okay, I need to know exactly what's happening with Leith. Let's run the package about his wife in the next segment, but you guys keep the cameras on the limos. Make sure you get Mirren McLean's face on a close-up when she arrives, and I want Davie Johnston's first words. Do your work, people. This is going to be a shit show, and we want the whole fucking world to be watching it here.
Chapter 1. The Academy Awards, the Dolby Theatre, 24th of February, 2019. Standing in the shadows of love, Four Tops. The limo slid to a halt in the line that stretched back from the entrance to the Dolby Theatre. Inside the cars was the action that the audience at home didn't see, the chaos, the waiting to arrive, the last slug of straight vodka, the last line of coke, the last adjustment to a dress to ensure the greatest exposure of both the body and the star. The last-minute phone calls to publicists screaming about the lack of coverage on the story that had been planted to ensure the flashlights and the C-lister would elevate them, just for tonight, to the spotlight of an A-lister. Even the entrance to the theatre was a facade. The shops that lined the walkway to the theatre were covered for one evening only with luxurious drapes. It would be so easy to pull back the curtain in Hollywood in every sense of the word. But of course, no one ever did. 6 cars back from the beginning of the red carpet, in a smooth black Bentley limo, Mirren McLean was one of the last to arrive for the night's proceedings. On the cream leather seat, she sat bolt upright. To accommodate the bone corset of her bespoke gown, a work of body-hugging, crystal-beaded artistry that had been designed for her by fashion students at the Glasgow School of Art. For the first time, no major designer had offered to dress her. Over the last year, she discovered who her friends were, and she'd found that there were fewer than she could ever have imagined. Now, she wasn't sure if it was the constraints of the dress, the prospect of tonight's public appearance, the man sitting next to her, or the call she was taking on her phone that was forcing her lungs to work way too hard to get breath into her body. Look, I can't go in there if I don't know he's okay, she told the one person who had never let her down. Not ever. Lou Cole, editor of The Hollywood Post, the sister she'd chosen for herself when she'd met her back in 1989, a few months after she'd arrived in Hollywood. Lou Cole was Sasha Fierce with a pen. A magnificent woman of colour, a media queen who controlled the Hollywood press, who knew where the bodies were buried, and more importantly, knew who'd buried them. There was barely a hotel manager, a club promoter, or a service industry employee in this city who wasn't on her list of informants. For a price, of course. Don't worry, babe, I'm on it. I'll find him. Okay, call me back. Love you. Mirren ended the call, dropped her phone into her Judith Leiber crystal clutch, and snapped it shut. She could already see the flashes of the cameras up ahead, and the very thought of going out there made her stomach churn. The single wave of tissue hair that flowed over her right shoulder, held in place by a diamond clasp, and made rock solid by a $2,000 an hour hair guru that afternoon, barely budged as she turned to her companion. I don't know if I can do this, Mike. Mike Feakin, head of Pictor, a movie studio that carried as much weight as the bigger boys at Lomax, Warner Brothers, Universal and Paramount. The third love of her life, and her second husband, the one she truly thought would last until the end of time. Not anymore. Not now that he could barely look at her when he spoke. If I can walk out there with you after everything that's happened, you can damn well play your part. Even if it's pointless? Come on, Mike. They only nominated me because Klansman had the biggest box office this year, and they needed a woman on the ballot sheet. There's no way they're letting me win. Not now. The Academy would never withstand the backlash. His jaw pulsed as she watched him bite back the obvious reply. He'd withstood it. He'd taken the charge. The body blow. He'd let the whole world tear her apart and destroy everyone she touched. And he was still here. At least today. For this. Because this wasn't just personal. It was work. The Klansman movies, Mirren's series of box office breaking films about a heroic warrior in 16th century Scotland, had earned Pictor billions of dollars. His presence here today wasn't love. It was protecting his investment. Suck it up, Mirren. This is one deal you don't get to quit. The bitterness in his voice made her flinch, and the worst thing was that she didn't blame him one bit. He hated her because she'd humiliated him, taken a wrecking ball to their marriage, their careers, their future, and most painful of all, her reputation. All that was left in the rubble was disdain, disgust, and a sign saying, cancelled until further notice. Yep, Mirren McLean had well and truly screwed up her life. Millions of movie fans watched this spectacle on the televisions around the globe, would give anything to be here. Mirren would give anything to be anywhere else. That wasn't strictly true. The only place she wanted to be right now was with her friend, Zander Leith. 2 cars behind Mirren, Davie Johnston was sweating through the fine layer of foundation his makeup artist had applied an hour before, as he read the headlines on the tinseldowntrials.com article that had just dropped onto his phone. How the mighty have fallen. It was the zinger of a line underneath that made him want to kill someone. After blowing his 9 lives, have last rites been delivered to Davie Johnston? The grind in his teeth was so violent it risked his $50,000 veneers. The very parasites that had sucked on him when he was at the top now gloated when he was at the bottom. It would be tempting to respond. If his PR agency hadn't dumped him the month before, perhaps he would have. Now they were all just rats deserting a sinking ship, and he was the Titanic. Against the orders that were screaming from the tiny cell of dignity that remained in his body, he began skimming the rest of the piece, absorbing the lines that jumped out, believed his own hype, dinosaur who didn't read the room, broke the unspoken rule, used his own cash. He didn't need to read every word to fill in the blanks. Hell, there wasn't a television viewing person in the USA who didn't know the details of his demise. A few years ago, he did 3 of the top-rated shows on TV. A talent show called American Stars that imploded when the ex-boyfriend of one of his winners killed one person, seriously injured several more, and tried to murder Davie in twisted revenge attacks because he believed the show had taken away the love of his life. Davie survived. American Stars didn't. There had been his reality show, Beauty and the Beats, featuring a washed-up, drug-addled 80s rock star and his 25-year-old cokehead model girlfriend. That one had taken its final sound check when the rock star had the temerity to drop dead on the first episode of Davie's former talk show. That was his other hit, Here's Davie Johnston, which, after the huge publicity of actually killing a guest on episode 1, had found a ratings-busting niche as the midnight safe space where the stars who didn't want the Ellen afternoon audience or to sing for their supper on Fallon or Kimmel came to just lay it all out. No holds barred. They could say what they wanted, curse when they liked, and there was only one rule. No woke PR shit was allowed. He'd brought in politicians, YouTube stars, disgraced public figures, actors who could handle the challenges and deliver honesty instead of sound bites. Famous names who wanted to be real. Every time a star claimed to be blessed or that working with another huge ego was an honor, the audience were encouraged to show their displeasure with boos and cries of bullshit. At first, it was a novelty, a massive hit, meteoric, but it wasn't long before one too many offensive comments riled the woke agenda, and the most virtual signaling town in the USA rebelled against it, against him. But still, he kept going, convinced that he was right, that the backlash wouldn't last, that the new generation of snowflakes would toughen up and stop being so fucking offended by everything. And that's when he danced with the two unspoken rules in Hollywood. Number 1, never use your own money. Number 2, never ever use your own money. Davie Johnston gambled with his cash. He'd been accused of having BDE, big dick energy. And yep, he'd showed it. Defiant, furious, determined that being cancelled by the chinless cretins wouldn't dent him. He'd ploughed every penny he had, and some more that he didn't, into launching a new talk show. Davie Johnston as it is. He couldn't even take credit for the idea to self-finance. Back in 2004, Mel Gibson had rescued his career by using his own cash to make The Passion of the Christ. But then he'd had Jesus on his side. Oprah had gone one step further, launching her own frickin' network. OWN, OWN. Although back then she'd had big bucks partners in Discovery Communications. That was his planned trajectory. Make a brilliant show, then watch as the big players, Warner Brothers, NBC, Sony, ABC, Paramount, CBS, came flocking to buy in. In Davie's case, no one gave a flock. Oh, but he did get fucked in the process. He couldn't even think about that now. Denial, that's what he was going for. Especially when it came to his empty bank account and the huge new mortgage on his $45 million Bel Air mansion. He'd also discovered that there was something much worse than failing, than losing everything, than blowing up his life. And that was becoming irrelevant. A new generation was reshaping Hollywood, and there was no place in it for a middle-aged, anti-woke maverick who thought his star would never fade. And that big dick energy? Decidedly flaccid. A few years ago, he'd presented the Oscars. Not last year, when they had the lowest ratings in recent history. No, that didn't happen in his watch. His shows had brought in the highest viewing figures of recent years. Changed times. Tonight, there would be no host after Kevin Hart lost the gig, and Davie had to call in favours just to get on the guest list. Man, that stung. And he didn't even have his family to fall back on. Reveling in his misfortune was his ex-wife's favourite sport. His kids acted like they couldn't stand him, and they were way too famous to give a toss about their embarrassing old man. And Sarah, the love of his life, had walked away from him. Cancel that. She'd run, actually. She'd fucking sprinted. One mistake that he still didn't even understand, and she'd bailed on him. Bastards! Unable to read any more of the crap, he threw his phone against the glass privacy window between him and the driver, who hadn't been keen to take this job in case he didn't get paid. Rumours of Davie's financial difficulties were already swirling around town, and he wasn't sure how much longer he was going to be able to keep a grip on any of this. He needed a miracle. And contrary to the shit rom-coms that drew in millions for the streaming services every Christmas, the reality was that they were in short supply. The pain that struck his cheek was as sharp as it was unexpected. Thanks to a rubber shatterproof case on his phone, the damn thing had come right back like a boomerang and slapped him on the side of the face. With rueful resignation, he decided that was a metaphor for his whole life these days. Shot himself in the foot, slapped himself in the face. Stay tuned for tomorrow, folks, when a meteor lands in my bed and kills me while I sleep. Oh, and the irony. Despite playing frisbee with the phone, the damn thing still worked, as he realised when it began to ring, blaring out the theme tune to Braveheart. Cheesy, sure, but it was the ringtone he'd allocated to Mirren years ago, and he'd never changed it. "Hey," he answered in the fourth ring. "Where are you?" Her voice, even after all these years, made something inside him soften. She had been his first love, and he'd been hers. 16 years old and a world away in a rough housing scheme on the outskirts of Glasgow. Urban deprivation, they'd called it. He disagreed. There had been no deprivation when Mirren had been pressed up against him in a single bed in a bedroom that was a quarter of the size of his walk-in closet now. In the limo line, probably 10 minutes out, right at the end. Guess they're hoping the cameras will have moved inside by the time I get there. Yeah, me too. Have you heard anything from Zander? I've been trying to get him all day, but he's not replying. The footage is horrific. Davie, CNN showed aerial images and his whole house is decimated, burned to the ground. I know. I saw it. There was a sudden self-realization that, yep, that was the kind of selfish prick he'd become, enraged about a stupid article when his half-brother and lifelong friend was missing, his home incinerated in a wildfire that was raging through Malibu. Zander had moved there a few years ago, after he married his assistant Hollie. It had been his wedding gift to her, and they adored it, made it their home, their sanctuary. Zander had found peace there. Davie had envied him that, until the unthinkable had happened. Not the fire. That didn't even come close to the tragedy that had blighted Zander last year. No. What happened 6 months ago was brutal. Horrific. Mirren's voice cut into his thoughts. I don't feel right coming tonight, but I'm hoping we can't get a hold of him because he's already here, ready to present as planned. I'm praying he's hiding out somewhere backstage, being Zander. Davie knew exactly what she meant. To the outside world, Zander Leith was the biggest action hero in the movieverse. He'd played Dunhill, a tough, super suave spy who'd fought terrorists, organised crime, and mendacious third-world dictators in 10 movies now, and neither his popularity nor his box office showed any signs of diminishing. Of course, his image had fed the hype. For almost 20 years, he'd been the incorrigible Hollywood bad boy. Hard drinking, drugs, jails, and rehab were way too familiar to him. But the rest of the world also saw the good-looking, self-deprecating Zander, the one who didn't go looking for trouble, but who found it anyway. The one who punched out a vapid, attention-seeking reality star, twice, for insulting women he'd loved. The one who couldn't be sexier, even when he was in handcuffs. To them, he was just doing what Dunhill would do, and perversely, his popularity grew with every flying fist and scandal. Only the few people on the inside of Zander's world knew different. They knew he was fighting a lifetime of demons, formed by a childhood of violence and poverty, and a malevolent bastard of a father, John O'Leith, whom teenage Zander had helped bury with his own hands after Mirren's mother killed him. The trauma had left him damaged, with a deep-rooted conviction that he was unworthy of love, until two women changed him. Chloe, Mirren's 18-year-old daughter, a fellow addict who brought out a paternal side that Zander never knew he had. He'd fought with everything to save her, but still failed. And that moment had changed him. He'd never touched alcohol or drugs again. That left space for Hollie, the person who'd loved him, whether he was on top of the world or in a gutter. Her job description had changed from assistant to wife, and they'd found the kind of happiness they truly deserved. Until... Davie, are you listening? Mirren blasted his ear. Shit, hang on. Sarah's trying to FaceTime me. I'll add her to this. Davie's hand began to tremble as anxiety kicked in, just as it had every time he'd seen Sarah since she'd left him. Davie's ex-fiance's face filled half of the screen. He knew she was 10 miles away in Malibu, far from the glitz and glamour of the 91st Academy Awards, trying to find out if Zander was there or if he'd made it out before the fire took hold. Davie could see the smoke was thick around her, could almost taste the ash and carnage that was choking her, so that her words came out as hoarse barks of desperation. Mirren, Zander... The line died. And for the second time tonight, rage and fear exploded inside him, taking his heart rate to triple figures. He wanted to scream, to kick out the limo windows, to smash his phone to pieces. This time he didn't even try, because if Sarah called back, he needed to be there for her, like he hadn't been when it mattered, when he'd let her walk away from him. What the fuck was that? He was screaming at Mirren now, who was still on his screen, and she was trying to calm him. Davie, I don't know, but we will try to get her back. Look, I'll call Lou right now and we'll keep trying. We'll find her. Shit, Davie. I'm here. I'm at the circus. Mirren shielded her eyes from the flashlights of dozens of cameras and had to speak louder to be heard over the wall of noise as the limo door opened. Find me in the inside, Davie. I'll wait for you. Mirren's split-second decision had been made. If she stayed in the car and drove off now, it would pull attention her way, cause a scene, and her no-show would be perceived as an admission of guilt over the scandal that had been swirling around her for months. Although none of that mattered. What truly mattered was that the last thing Mirren wanted to do was put herself at the centre of what was going on with Zander. This was his pain, his heartbreak, and the most important thing right now was finding out if he was safe, if he was already inside, if he'd made a private entrance to avoid the cameras and was right now sitting in a dressing room, mourning his losses and needing a friend. She was the friend, and she had to get to him. Ready for the performance of a lifetime? Mike asked, dread in every word, and she saw the pain in him too. She deserved his anger, and all she could do was take it. Smile on, she came out of that limo waving like a pro. The first person she saw was Mishka Alves, her head of PR, who'd been in front of her on the red carpet preparing the way through the gauntlet of press. Don't allow questions about Zander or anything personal. I'm only talking about the movie and the Oscars, she hissed through a megawatt smile that had been compared to the iconic grin of Julia Roberts by 1,000 lazy journalists. She had the same waves of red hair too, but that was where the similarity stopped. Mirren McLean had a pale west of Scotland complexion, her mother's blue eyes, and an angular bone structure that was more Blanchard than Roberts. Right now, she worked the smile, and she worked the wave with the arm that wasn't threaded around the elbow of her dashing, relaxed partner. Yeah, Mike was putting on the performance of a lifetime too. Just as she'd asked, Mishka steered her through the crowd on the red carpet, the A-listers acting like they loved this, even though they despised every second of it. The plus ones either basking or seething in the shadows, the interviewers desperate to land another soundbite that would be viral within the hour. Ryan Seacrest, Juliana Rancic, Ross King, Sam Rubin, Jessica Holmes, Mila Rivera, and a few others, all schmoozing the stars. Mirren passed right on by, but she could hear the shouts of the journalists on the balcony above. Mirren, do you think you're going to win tonight? Are you taking legal action? Mirren, do you have any comment on the allegations against you? What do you say to victims of sexual abuse in the workplace? Have you spoken to Zander? She ignored them all, just kept smiling, moving forward, waving, dying inside. Every second feeling like an hour as she traveled in slow motion up the red carpet of fame and achievement that she loathed with every fibre of her being. As soon as she got to the end of the carpet, she was greeted by one of the dozen clipboard militias. Miss McLean, we're running late for the live start, so we have to get you straight to your seat. She scanned back the way she came, hoping to see Davie, but he wasn't there. Anxiety crushing her chest, she slipped her phone back out of her purse and called Zander again. Still no answer. Is Zander Leith here? She asked the 20-something blonde behind the clipboard. I'm sorry, Miss McLean, I have no idea. Right this way, please. There was no point objecting. The event was run with military precision, and defectors were shot on sight, usually by an errant photographer who would then fuel the rumour that a star was difficult or in crisis or out of control. She didn't need more scurrilous accusation, so she went along with it. Mike dropped his arm, avoiding contact as they were led to their seats past 3 decades of friendships. If she hadn't been panicking inside, she might have noticed their reactions, spotted the minority who still smiled at her in solidarity, and the majority of fair weathers who averted their gaze, desperate not to be caught being kind to the woman who now came with the stink of cancellation. Mirren McLean had become a pariah, and as she reached her seat at the very end of a row and out of scope of the cameras that would pan the room as awards were announced, she caught sight of Davie being seated in the same row, but at the opposite side of the Dolby Theatre, another one in the pariah wings. They should have sat them together and given the cameras one less area to avoid. Before she could catch his eye or signal to him, the house lights went down. The stage lights went up. Mirren had seen the rehearsal and read the script, so she knew what to expect. The red curtain was about to rise with an explosion of light and sound. Queen would open the show in a riot of smoke and attitude to the soundtrack of Brian May's searing guitar, Adam Lambert's pitch-perfect vocals. No doubt the stars would immediately jump to their feet, clapping and dancing, aware that acting like they were having a great time would bring the camera focus to them for an extra second or two. A video montage of some of the year's big movies was scheduled to follow the opening number. Among them, Bohemian Rhapsody, Deadpool 2, Black Panther, Vice, A Star is Born, Roma, Green Book, The Favourite, before Tina Fey, Maya Rudolph and Amy Poehler would take to the stage to announce the first award. But not yet. First, there would be some off-camera activity in preparation for the live broadcast. One of the producers came onto the stage, checked some technical stuff with the gallery, then ran through a few announcements, sharing the news that there would be a last-minute change to the schedule. A hush descended as the audience realized this wasn't part of the plan. This broadcast ran like clockwork, was drilled, timed, and rehearsed weeks in advance. They rarely veered off script, although it often overran, usually due to winners deciding to thank everyone they'd ever known, or sobbing unconsolably, otherwise known as doing a Gwynnie, after the overly emotional speech by Miss Paltrow when she picked up the Little Gold Guy for Best Actress in 1999 for Shakespeare in Love. If there was an unexpected alteration to the script at this stage, then it was something big, something unexpected, something way too cataclysmic to ignore. Mirren felt her whole body begin to tremble as Paula Leno, head of publicity for Lomax Films, the studio that had launched Mirren's career and that had made all of Zander's movies, took to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the live broadcast will start in a few moments, but the Academy felt it only right that you should know that in the last few minutes we've learned of the death of a friend, of a legend, of a man that many of you know and love. That's when Mirren knew what Sarah had been trying to tell them. Her best friend, the man who had shared her life since she was 12 years old, Zander Leith, was dead.
8 months earlier, June 2018. Chapter 2, Mirren McLean. God is a Woman, Ariana Grande.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lou Cole, and I can't thank you all enough for coming here to the opening of Chloe's Care downtown, the 5th Chloe's Care Center to open its doors in the last 4 years. As you all know, these centers were established in honor of Chloe Gore, a remarkable young woman whom we lost to addiction at just 18 years old. Now, I'd like to welcome to the stage a woman who is many things. Best-selling author, director, producer, creator of one of the most successful movie franchises in Hollywood history, the founder of Chloe's Care, the huge checkbook. That got a few laughs before she went on. And the reason that so many people are helped by these incredible facilities. Please welcome my best friend and Chloe's mom, Mirren McLean.
Even though many in the audience were holding phones in one hand, recording the event, the applause in the room was raucous. As Mirren passed Lou on the stage, she leaned in to hug her. "I'll bloody kill you for all that acclaim, bollocks," she whispered, out of earshot of the rest of the room.
"Give it your best shot, girl."
Lou laughed, kissing her on the cheeks, then taking her place at the side of the stage next to Mirren's son, Logan Gore, and his wife, Lauren. Thankfully, they were pretty much standing in front of her ex-husband and Chloe's father, Jack Gore, who, despite contributing nothing to these centres, always turned up to share the glory. On the other side of the stage stood the director of the centre and the counsellors that would be working here. Lynette Washington, the head of the centre, was alongside LeBron Ray, a therapist who had worked with Zander and Chloe back in the day, and 4 other experienced addiction specialists that had been recruited to the team. Mirren didn't glance their way, unwilling to make eye contact with someone who was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She knew Jason Grimes would be clapping, could hear him cheering, and her face flushed. Not today. Not tonight. Not ever again. Mirren nodded gratefully, even though the applause went on a little longer than she was comfortable with. There was a reason she chose to write, to direct, to do anything that kept her behind the camera and out of the spotlight. She didn't do interviews, didn't participate in behind-the-scenes documentaries about her success, and point-blank refused to do anything that made her centre of attention, preferring to just keep her head down and get on with the work. Despite that reticence, she'd still made her fair share of headlines over the years. Almost a decade ago, her face had been on every tabloid when Jack had been caught screwing Mercedes Dance, the 20-something star of a movie he was producing at that time. Despite Mirren's fervent wish that his dick would fall off and he'd seek a life of obscurity, she wasn't that lucky. The asshole had now been through half the reality stars and Z-listers in town, losing his career and credibility in the process. He'd been through his midlife crisis, his fast car stage, his bomber jacket years, his rocker vibe, his metrosexual interlude, and his hair transplant. He was still in his 23-year-old girlfriend stage, but now it came with a yoga mat, a man bun, and conversations about chakras and being lactose intolerant, all of which tended to make her Jack Gore intolerant. Her son brought fame to their door too. He'd been a singer in South City, the most famous boy band of this century, who were now officially on a break. Nowadays, boy bands never officially broke up, because they knew it was far more profitable to keep the fans on side for their solo projects. It was a strategy that clearly worked, because Logan was killing it in his solo career. It hadn't hurt when he'd married Lauren Finney, who was beaten in global record sales last year by Ed Sheeran, Drake, Taylor Swift and... Actually, that was it. The 4th best-selling artist of 2017. It was a source of much friendly rivalry that Logan only charted at number 6 on worldwide record sales. But when it came to live performances, Logan still won top prize for tickets sold. No one else could touch his popularity as he continued to sell out stadiums in cities across the globe. It would be easy and lazy to class him as a nepo baby, the term used for children of stars who then use their parents' fame or fortune to create their own success. But that had never happened, because it was well documented that back when he was 16, Logan had ambushed his parents by auditioning for the band. He was in before they even knew he could sing. At the start, Mirren hadn't been up for it at all, but his father had persuaded her to let him do it. For once, Jack had been right. Of course, her ex-husband couldn't help but milk their attention, turning up at every gig, every award show, every photo opportunity. But Mirren stayed out of it. Logan's success was his own, and she didn't want or need to take the credit for it. Her only unavoidable exception to the no publicity rule had been her work with Chloe's Care, the chain of centres she'd set up to support young addicts and street kids in memory of her daughter, Chloe. When her daughter had died an addict at 18, Mirren knew her heart would never be whole again, but these centres put a patch on the cracks. 5 of them now, all in different areas of LA, all open 24/7, saving the lives that wanted to be saved and taking care of the ones that were too far gone to turn back. "Thank you," she said into the microphone as the 100 or so people in the room gave her their full attention. "I'm not one for speeches, but I'd like to say this. Her focus was distracted momentarily by a new arrival who'd come through the door at the back of the room and was now standing against the back wall, watching her. Well over 6 feet, he moved with the easy confidence of a guy who was used to commanding a room, and now his gaze was on her, eyes narrowed, taking in every word that she said. It was only then she realised she'd been waiting for him, hoping he'd come. She stuttered, flustered, then inhaled, steadied herself, found her voice again. I adored my daughter Chloe. I loved her with everything I had, but it wasn't enough to save her. Along the way, I learned a lot, met many experts and addicts and families who cared for them, and all of that expertise and love has gone into building the facilities that we have here now. I so wish that I'd had somewhere like Chloe's care back then. We can't save everyone blighted by the disease of addiction, but we will try. I couldn't save Chloe, but hopefully we can help many more young people in her name. Thank you to my family, to our donors, to our incredible staff here, and at all the Chloe's care centres across the city. We couldn't do this without you. Another round of applause, cheers of congratulation, hugs from her family and friends. As always, Mirren struggled with the emotion of it all. What should be a happy moment was numbed by the reminder that this was only here because Chloe was dead, and nothing she could do would change that. Her family and best friend understood that. Do you want to go grab a drink and something to eat? Lou asked, with a squeeze of her hand, her long manicured nails a kaleidoscope of colour. Lou had barely aged since they'd met when a young reporter interviewed a writer who'd landed in Hollywood from Scotland and won her first Oscar in her early 20s. Wes Lomax had discovered Mirren's script on a golf holiday to St Andrews, and in one of these 1,000,000-to-1 scenarios had made the damn thing into a movie, The Brutal Circle, starring Davie and Zander. It had been the biggest shock to them all when it became an instant classic that had won them a gold statue. Back in the late 80s, Lou had called it, had told her she was about to hit the big time. Then she'd suggested they go for cocktails, and 30 years later, they were still doing it. We're going to head to Giorgio Baldi. Come on, I'll treat you to your favourite Dova Soul, she added. You can help me convince the young ones that we're in our prime. She joked, gesturing to Logan and Lauren, who were busy smoozing the donors, interacting with the guests, half of which were only invited so they'd open the apps on their phones and Venmo some 4-figure donations to the QR code on the autograph cards the two singers were doling out. Most of them would take the bait, then drive home in $100,000 cars that cost more in gas every year than the cash they'd just dropped to make themselves look good. Mirren didn't care. She'd take all she could get. Half of the profits from her company and 100% of the royalties from her Klansman novels already financed the centres, so she'd welcome any extra funds she could rustle up. No, I'm good. I'm just going to slip out the back. But thank you, honey. I'll call you tomorrow. Logan, you got this? She asked her son, who'd wandered over to her, leaving his dad, who was very clearly hitting on her PR manager, Mishka. Mirren wasn't worried. Mishka liked them somewhere between Thor and Momoa on the body scale. Mirren was pretty sure that Jack drew in his abs with bronzer. Facially, there was no mistaking that Logan had his father's DNA. Chloe had come from Mirren's Scottish side of the gene pool, with her red waves and pale complexion, but Logan had the blonde hair and chiselled jaw of the Gore side, a fact that wasn't missed by the millions of teenagers who had his gorgeous face as their screensaver. I've got it, Ma, her son assured her, using her favourite Scottish word for mum, Since Chloe had passed, for every tear she'd shed for her daughter, she'd given up a prayer of gratitude for her son. "Thanks. I'm just going to go and..." Logan's wife, Lauren, one of Mirren's favourite people on this earth, had come up behind her and wrapped her arms around her. "We know. We'll call you in the morning. Love you, Mama." "Love you back," Mirren whispered, before quietly making for the exit. She never stayed longer than she had to at these events, too scared that she'd crack and every pearl of devastation and grief inside her would roll right across the floor for all to see. Her gaze went to the back wall, to where the late arrival had stood, but of course he was gone. She'd known he would be. He wouldn't stick around for the small talk either. It wasn't his way. The mild chill of the LA evening made Mirren shiver as she slipped out of the fire exit at the back of the building and into her car. Mercedes. A basic model, though. She didn't need the attention, the ego boost, or the dent in her bank balance for the kind of swanky rides that were usually seen in this city's streets. She'd sold her top-of-the-range, pimped-out, swanky Range Rover to buy furniture for the third Chloe's Care Centre, which was an eminently more sensible decision than when she'd rolled her ex-husband's Lamborghini over a cliff the first time she'd caught him cheating. She sat on the speed limit as she headed west, onto I-10, the freeway that would take her all the way to Santa Monica, where she'd veer right onto the Pacific Coast Highway, the legendary stretch of road that snaked up the west coast from San Diego to Washington. Abbreviated to PCH, it would pave her way, mountains on one side, sea breeze on the other, all the way to her Malibu colony home. Only tonight, she didn't take that route. Instead, without even making a conscious decision, she cut a right just after Will Rogers Beach and headed up to Pacific Palisades, to a home that was in darkness when she pulled into the long, concealed driveway. It didn't matter. She knew why she was there and where she had to go. The security lights came on at the side gate as she punched in the numbers that granted access to the back of the building. Treading silently, her shoes discarded back at the car, she made her way around to the pool, barely acknowledging the stunning view of the lights of Santa Monica below. In daylight, she would be able to see all the way to the ocean. "I wondered if you'd come." His voice, from one of the loungers at the side of the Infinity Edge pool. "Me too," she told him, dropping her jacket, opening her shirt, then the buttons of her jeans as she went towards him. By the time she reached him, all he had to do was pull off her jeans and she was naked. She straddled him, kissing him, recognizing his smell, his taste, pulling off his shirt, then his belt, then the waistband and zip of his pants until he was free. Silent, except for the sound of their breaths and their moans, they made love in the open air, and then he carried her into bed where they made love again. It wasn't just sex. This was more than that. It was twisted, complicated, gut-wrenching love, the kind that hurt more than it soothed the soul. It was dawn when she sat up, pulled the sheet around her, ready to go. "Thank you for coming to the centre last night." "I wouldn't be anywhere else," he told her, his fingers tracing a line down her spine. The room was cold now, the glass doors out to the pool deck still open wide. "We can't keep doing this," he said. Mirren stood up, taking the sheet with her. "I know. So change it. Let me come home to my wife." Even in the dawn light, she could see the determined set of her husband's jaw. Mike Feechan was a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and the problem was that he wanted too much of her, more than she could give. Their marriage had been great for the first couple of years, until he'd grown impatient with the time she gave to everything else but their lives together. In the industry, she was one of the rarefied few, the Untouchables, that pulled in a massive slice of the global box office. She was a triple threat: writer, producer, director, and none of that came without total focus. Then there was her obsession with Chloe's care, her son. All of them came before Mike, before her own happiness. Over the last year, she'd pushed everything to the limit in preparation for opening this centre, immersed herself in the shoot for the new Klansman, drowned in grief, and she'd shut Mike out. She knew that. He'd begged her to give him something, but somehow self-imposed solitary confinement was the path of lesser pain. Eventually he'd had enough, moved out, and this was what married life looked like now. Separate houses, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He'd thought leaving, taking a break, would make her reevaluate her life. In the meantime, it had just turned him into an estranged husband with benefits, and her into a lonely workaholic who sought him out for sex, but who didn't think she'd ever match up to his expectations as a wife. Now, maybe, she thought she could. He was right. They belonged together. It was time. Now that the new centre was open, she could let the professionals take over, step back for a while. The space from him had shown her how much she'd missed him, ached for him. Time to stop living in the pain of the past and move forward. It was time to prioritise her life, her future, her marriage, and concentrate on making this work. "You really want to come back?" she asked him, leaning back, kissing his neck. "I do. But only if you're in. If we're going to give it everything." "I'm in," she told him truthfully. She meant it. Mike Feechan was the love of her life, and she'd let him go. Time to change that, before it was too late. "I'll move my stuff back tomorrow," he whispered, climbing on top of her, sealing the deal by reminding her just how good it felt to be loved by him. An hour later, the sun was bright when she climbed back into her car and headed down the canyon towards home, feeling something that took a moment to identify. Joy. She was happy. Mike was coming back, and this time they were going to make it. The feeling lasted until she slowed to leave the PCH, turning left onto Webb Way, when her phone pinged to signal an incoming text. At first, she assumed it would be Mike. It wasn't. "Hey, baby. You looked amazing last night. I wanted to speak to you, but I know you're not ready yet. Just don't say it's over, because it isn't. I need to see you. Today? Tonight? You say where and when. Jay. Kiss." Nope, not Mike. Someone else. Her mistake. The one that refused to stay in the past. The one that could destroy any chance of reclaiming her love, her marriage, her future. Mirren McLean picked up her phone and pressed delete.
Chapter 3. Zander Leith. Truly, madly, deeply. Savage Garden. On a scale of 1 to 10, dangling 100 feet in the air with his bollocks trapped inside a safety harness was a solid 0 on Zander Leith's scale of enjoyment. He only started breathing again when the director yelled, "Cut!" and the stunt team hauled him back up. Rick, the stunt double he'd worked with on the Dunhill movies for the last 2 decades, got ready to take his place and be dropped back down the side of the skyscraper in downtown LA. "You okay, man?" Rick asked as they passed each other on the roof. "Yeah, but fuck Tom Cruise. Life was so much easier before he shamed us all into doing more of our own stunts." "I hear you, bud," Rick agreed, laughing. In a dim light, he could be Zander's brother, The same wavy fair hair, same wide shoulders, same physique, thanks to daily martial arts and gym workouts. Even when he'd been in the worst grip of addiction, Zander never missed the gym, knowing that his career and his earnings depended on his ability to embody a